Want me out of the video? I mean, the consensus is that it's a reference to Al-Iskandar, Al-Makhduni. Which is one of my answers.
Well, I like to follow things up like that because I think a lot of things, like last night, funnily enough, I was looking at content over everything. I found myself awake last night looking at Noah. It was on television on BBC Two. There was Noah on television. And they were showing, I like the modern interpretation of the kind of internal struggle he would have had to convince people. But of course, there was a lot of stuff in there that I had never known about, like his manner of collectively using bukhur, agarbati, to put all the animals to sleep so that they wouldn't have to fight each other or consume each other. But what was interesting about that story to me was it's a story that was known from Sumerian mythology. It's known from ancient, much more ancient mythology. So what do we say that invalidates the story of the flood in the Bible? Because we as Muslims admit that the story of the flood in the Quran is nothing new to us. If we were Christian before, or we'd come across the Bible earlier in our life, we would have known the story. It's in the Bible. The same story with minor differences. But the Bible, the story also exists in older historical texts. I think in Sumeria or one of those older civilizations.
I know in the Zoroastrian religion they talk about the prophet Zoroaster, I think, taking on 2 of every animal and 2 of every vegetable onto a ship, and a great flood happens. So this whole great flood story does occur in different, interpretations across cultures in the region.
So, but how do we, what implication do we draw from that? Do we not believe it to be true? Do we take it in a parabolic fashion? Yeah. Or do we believe literally you had 2 leopards lying down next to 2 sheep? And well, the only way the modern story could explain it is that something soporific was induced and they all fell asleep lying next to each other.
Yeah.
How would you interpret the story of the flood with all these different animals? Mosquitoes, were mosquitoes in there?
Yeah.
I mean,
I suppose if I was to look at this in a out of the box fashion, I suppose I'd say that if our contention is how did this happen pragmatically, when we're talking about discussions about religion and the divine, the fact that the natural order is broken and things happen in a non-typical fashion, that's beside the point. So is it a concern if we say there were 2 rhinos next to 2 lions and 2 gazelles and nothing happened?
My only caveat with that argument is that how far are we willing to stretch that argument? If we are going to suspend disbelief, we could easily add, well, there was a couple T-Rex in there as well. Or the blue whale was swimming around with some other prehistoric creature. We didn't have to put the whale or the walrus or the tortoise, the turtle, onto the ship. The shark didn't have to go onto the ship. So they didn't need to be saved, but there were definitely other sort of animals that actually do need water and land, like frogs. Although frogs can exist quite for long periods on land, frogs need moisture. They need to periodically re-immerse themselves. Frogs, salamanders, the amphibian world. So I find I like to ask this question because we have a lot of literalists in all 3 revealed Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, who believe the story to be as is. Muslims get a pass on this because the Quran doesn't go into as much detail in the story as the Bible. The Bible, if asked to stand by a literal interpretation, gets asked the sort of question I'm asking you now. But with the Quran would just say, look, I'm summarizing a story that you already know from times of yore, but it's a cautionary tale. I'm not telling you for the purposes of either historicity or to amuse you as a storyteller. It's to warn you about things that happen when you destroy the ecology, the natural balance. Then either I will destroy all life on earth but for that little bit that's deserving to live, which is a select couple of human beings and animal life.
Would it be a cop-out if some Muslims said something along the effect of, if that is the rules that the Quran has laid out in the way that we understand these events, why don't we play these rules, take the story as it is, as revealed, and just take the message because it's a sign of warning, and we've taken the warning, we've taken it on as need be, and no need questions need to be asked.
Well, herein lies a problem. Once you tug at a thread, a garment can easily come apart. And if your garment comes apart too easily under that pressure, then you get what you have in the world today. People who shut down and become literalists and say, I'm not listening anymore, I rely on taqleed, just blind faith. So for example, if you take something like what was being discussed this morning on television, I don't know if you saw it, there was a whole hour given over to discussing issues in Islam. And this is one of the problems that came up. How do we interpret some of these events? For example, if you talk about homosexuality, there are Muslims who would say there is no direct punishment or condemnation of homosexuality. There was condemnation of Lut, the people of Lot. And it doesn't go, again, whereas the Bible goes into meticulous detail, the Quran does not. It just says these people were punished for the way they chose to live their lives, the abomination. The Bible actually goes into such detail as to say, not only did they sodomize each other, when they were offered the alternative of two girls instead of the guests that visited Abraham, they declined the offer of the girls and said we prefer the two men, the angels. So the Bible actually, the Old Testament, leaves you in no doubt as to how or what was being condemned. Whereas the Quran would just say the lifestyle of these people, blah, blah, blah. Now
Sheikh, what if some Muslim counters that argument by saying, you know, we can't look at the Quran in isolation. We have what has come with the Quran, which is the Sunnah and the Hadith, and we have a whole methodology that is built which provides exposition to these verses, context, and it allows us to interpret them with, you know, particular reference to events and circumstances. Scenarios.
I'd agree with them insofar as those Hadith actually support the Quran, whatever the Quran will say. If the Hadith support it, then I have no problem with that. But what a lot of people are saying is a lot of the secondary writings were taken from Jewish sources, or the interpretations that gave rise to secondary writings were taken from Jewish sources. The written sources at the time were both Christian and Jewish, Hebraic and Christian, whether it's in the Koine Greek or in some form of Hebrew Aramaic. These were the people to whom they had recourse when they wanted something explained. And therefore, a lot of their interpretation would have that gloss. It would bear that imprint, that impress. I mean, what I was trying to say is, if you take something like slavery in Islam, you may notice that no country in Darul Islam now, or the Muslim world, save perhaps Mauritania, and even Mauritania has abolished slavery. But you hardly hear of any Muslim country talking about slavery as part of take the Gulf, where you find the biggest expression or implementation of aspects of Sharia. You never hear them talking about slavery. The only time you heard slavery come up was with IS, and when they were capturing Yazidi women, and who else were they? Whoever else was out there being captured, they mentioned we are now under conditions of war, and according to the Quran, we have the right to enslave those whom your right hand possess. You can take them as captives. But if Muslim societies have managed to actually quite unobtrusively and quite discreetly drop the subject of slavery altogether, if they can do that without really openly having an open discussion, because I don't know in my lifetime if there was ever an open discussion about ma malakut aymanikum, those whom your right hands possess. I have never and I, much older than most people here, I grew up hearing about Islam since the 60s. But I have never heard, it's only with ISIS I began to hear this law which permits them to enslave. And then a Saudi sheikh recently came up on his program on Saudi television and actually said, yes, I forget his name and it's gone now. But you can easily Google this chap, you can find him. And he said most Muslim countries are remiss in actually not implementing their rights to keep slaves, not to indulge in the slave trade. I will not misquote the man or add things he didn't say, but he said that there's nothing wrong. So I don't know if he had an eye on Libya when he was talking, because very much in the news today is what is happening in Libya, where as a sort of payback for Gaddafi's preferment of black people, this ungovernable state and the warlords therein are mistreating black people to the extent where an entire town called Tawarga, you must have heard of it, which had a sizable concentration of black people, was actually liquidated, and many of its inhabitants were taken off into slavery. So apart from the migrants trying to cross the Sahara to get into Europe, who are being re-enslaved, sometimes they get on a ship and then the Italians tell the Libyan Navy, you take care of this, we don't have the manpower to keep intercepting and rehousing people coming across the Sahara. What apparently some of these rogue Libyan traders were doing is rounding up those ships and selling the people into slavery. So this particular sheikh, this Saudi sheikh or Gulf, I don't know which country, would say that this is fine. He would say that this is perfectly in order. You know, the country's at war. It's descended into chaos since the fall of Gaddafi. It's ungovernable. War is being fought. We don't know what side these people take. We knew they took the side of Gaddafi in the war because Gaddafi gave them a lot of advancement whilst he was in power for 42 years. And now it's payback and they are going to be made to suffer. And part of that is their enslavement. And they're not discriminating as to which blacks they're enslaving. It is as though the word, the being black is synonymous. Abd and Aswad, black and slave, seem to be coterminous. And so how do we, to get back to my original question, how do we look at this business of the way the Muslim world, Darul Islam, has moved on away from discussing slavery, save for that sheikh and IS recently, whereas they don't seem to be able to have that same sort of conversation about homosexuality. And for example, you know, let me just land. I mean, like on the situation with the schools, the big furore in the schools, where they want to teach about, I think, Adam and Steve being parents, like two male parents are also, is an alternative but equally valid family, in a form of a family, or two mothers, two women, it's equal. And the parents felt they weren't consulted enough, and they kicked up a fuss about it. And some people are saying, why is there such a fuss, a furore about this, whereas nobody discussed the abolition of slavery in the Quran, but slavery has all but been dropped in most Muslim countries. How would we unpack that?
I have no idea where to start on that one.
Because it's hard for me to accept that. Talia Sheikh, let me introduce this man. You gotta come here a minute. Ahlan. Now, I want to introduce this brother. This brother is a long-standing member. You must know. Those who know this brother. Bizan, what is your first name? Abdurazak, yeah, Bizan. He is an old-standing member of Speaker's Corner. He used to stand across there, didn't you? Just across that bit, there and everywhere. And you saw things change. You saw the place change. We were having a discussion. Did you see that? You should have been on that program this morning, the big questions.
No,
I wish you were there.
My television is not working.
Abdullah Al-Andalusi was there. Salma Yaqub was there. Yvonne Ridley was there.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot. Some of them. And they were asking questions about the parenting in schools, the teaching of parenting in schools. And a question was raised regarding, well, why can't we have a rational discussion about two males being an alternative family, just as valid, or two females being an alternative family? Why can't we have a frank and open discussion about that, whilst in fact the Muslim world doesn't discuss slavery, but there's no slavery on the canon or the statute books of any Muslim country, so that whilst there is in fact the institution of slavery in the Quran, no Muslim country practices.
Let me tell you about the modern slavery.
Tafaddal, yeah.
From what I understand.
Yeah.
If there is something called slavery today, I would ask anyone here who's got a smartphone, who's in control. Is he in control of that smartphone? Or the smartphone
Stand
is
here,
in control of him?
Stand here, stand here. Yeah.
I mean, why can't we talk about this slavery?
But
You know,
can we talk about all of them?
I mean, it's amazing that people are controlled. Your children are controlled by smartphones. You don't have time with them. From one picture to another, from one program to another, 24 hours, 7 days a week, which is very, very serious now. Then after that, you don't know what's in their head, what's in their brains, what's in their. Sorry.
My children don't have smartphones.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, excellent. At least people say now they should have, telephone for 2 or 3 hours a day, but not 7 hours or 10 hours. But I mean, people thinking about slavery of other, but there are slaves of a modern technology and they are in controls basically.
But I mean, Abdul Razak, I would say, the discussion of one does not negate the discussion of another. We can discuss all of them. You see what I mean?
Yes.
I think we should discuss all of them, especially when some forms of slavery targets a particular ethnicity. For example, where you come from in Libya, we know what's happening there.
I mean, slavery is before even religion. I mean, men or, any tribes, before even any laws of nature has been set and people lived in a community, we always find that one tribe attack the other tribe, they will take their belongings and they will take their men and women as a slave. So this is one second, this existed from before. So basically when religion came, religion wanted to get rid of it. So how do you get rid of it? By, for instance, gradually, let's make some laws that would free some slaves with somehow. For instance, let's say if somebody would make a sin, how to God Almighty would forgive that sin. Let's say would free a slave. Let's say that's one of the ways how to say. But we will consider slavery where other men will slave others. Today we have women working in a modern society. They are being used like slaves. Slave to promote a production, slave to use their bodies. So it's not about just keeping someone behind walls and use them to cook for you or whatever, or have intercourse with them. But there are a lot of types of slavery in modern society.
Could I just ask though, with the root of slavery, do you think that it came with the enslavement of animals, as in the domestication of animals, that taking them out of the wilds was at the same time the domestication of humans?
Like, what do you think of slaving animals? Like, there are domestic animals, they could keep them with you and then they're happy with being with you.
They reckon that herdspeople, it has something like a 15,000 maybe year history, and that it may have been at the same time that humans became in servitude to other humans, at the same time that the animals came in servitude to humans. Because I just simply think if you see what the root of it, the beginning of it, then you have a chance of seeing the end of it.
Or at least to reduce it. I mean, certain things, like for instance, evil in the world, you cannot stop evil in any ways, but you only have to reduce it. And also, it's just kind of life itself. It's a struggle between good and evil. So it's never be good, absolute good, or it will never be absolute evil.
See, I'm a vegan activist, and the definition of veganism isn't not eating animal products, it's not causing any unnecessary harm. So an Eskimo who's eating meat all day is still a vegan, because they're obligate, they have to do that.
I mean, it's okay, we could understand these creatures, but from what our understanding, the creatures being made like kind of subservient to us in terms of how we use their product. But it's not to use them for a wrong thing. It's not to overuse them, or it's not like, for instance, people hunt for the cause of hunting or killing animals for the killing, but not for using them. And also not to use them for instance, experiments where they can be hurt. I mean, we are allowed to eat, for instance, and slaughter animals, but there is a way of slaughtering them, for instance.
But also about, like for example, I've friends who were in a factory farm last weekend, and they're all pigs, and the mothers, they could only move a foot backwards and a foot forwards, and this was high welfare. You know, Britain's the top 4 high welfare animal husbandry. They don't see the light of day, and then they're in gas chambers at the end of it. There's no integrity of the herd, so there's. For me, it's suffering from beginning to end. And I think if Jesus or Muhammad saw that, they wouldn't say that it was halal, if you like, or if it was...
I mean, let's tell you something of some of certain incidents where the Prophet had seen himself, and obviously it's kind of a prophecy. Once he saw a camel, and he came to the owner of the camel and said, the camel had complained to me, I could see the camels crying. So basically, like for instance, having a donkey and using the donkey or putting things on the top of the donkeys, which is over loud. Obviously, that's something that would not be acceptable, you know. So certain things that can be used, certain things, as I said, for instance, to slaughter animals, you know, you don't just bring one animal and let the other animals see animals slaughtered. I mean, those which is needed for the food, I'm not saying any animals. There are certain wild animals, sometimes you need to put them off. There's, you know,
But 99% of animals are held in a system where there's no natural breeding,
and also,
there's artificial insemination,
and also there's
no natural herd.
I do understand. Everything has been created, was created for a reason. There is no doubt. From the smallest thing, okay? Sometimes we cannot see the reason beyond it, but definitely it was not created for a foolish reason. For instance, one of the incidents that the Prophet said that a prophet was condemned because he killed ants, like a nation or groups of ants. And God said to that prophet in particular, why did you kill ants, which is called it a nation like you. You see, the Quran focuses even on every creation that it's a nation which is praises God. And God called it nation like you. So we call a human nation, animal nation, ant nations, and there's no differences when it comes to praising God. So, but every one of those nations praising God in different ways.
Can I ask him a question? Yeah, Abdul Razak, with the exponential increase in the human population and this need, this craving we have for meat, is it not inevitable that we are going to be committing the crime against which this brother here is speaking? The more humans are on earth, the more of us are around, the more of us want ready meat, quick meat, cheap meat. We Muslims import a large amount of meat from New Zealand, halal, but it's from New Zealand. We must know that even though we're not there to see how they rear them, they must be rearing them in the conditions similar to what he is talking about. Now, if we are supposed to, as Muslims, eat, which is what is lawful and good, halal or tayyib, it has to be good, not just halal.
No, the word lawful is not only if the animal is being slaughtered in a certain way, but the word lawful means also the meat is not a rotten meat, is available to consume, and is not something like you know, those people who had meat left outside the fridge for whatever, then they put it back, or you know, whatever else. It has to be examined that is suitable for a human use.
But we're talking about mechanized farming, the animal coming from these massive animals turning up in our halal shops all over London. They are slaughtered according to halal way, but the way they are brought up, the way they are reared, the conditions are not conducive to their well-being. So, like he is saying, you will keep cows standing in pens this big, and they'll be milking them by machine. So the animal itself is reduced to the status of a machine for you and me to buy a pint for £1. We go to Sainsbury and we get milk cheap.
And the cow is being standing
and the animal is being made to suffer. So according to us, what as Muslims ought we to be doing about a situation like that?
Okay, so basically
we love meat. Muslims love meat.
Say we had changed the way of life of animals, the way they should live their life in this planet, for the purpose of that, the benefit that we will get the most from them, no matter how we could use them or let them do their production. Is that right?
Yeah.
And which is not acceptable.
They have for me, you know, it's the suffering isn't just the death at the end.
less.
They have, I mean, they're shown not just to experience physical suffering, but also emotional suffering. So they suffer when the mother is separated from the child. When the child they have brothers and sisters. They have a family group. They have an integrity of herd, and so the separation of that integrity in itself is causing harm to them.
I mean, what kind of harm that are we certain? How would you understand that harm, or what is the level of that harm?
I mean, it's documented.
Let's say, for instance, when human being raised up, it's always gonna link to the family, isn't it? I mean, but animals to a certain stage that they can. I mean, we don't see, like, for instance, cats in the streets where, parents and families together, and we see them in a certain stage.
No, but cats are not herding animals. Like, for example, cows, sheep. The ones that we eat most: cows, goats, sheep. They naturally. What he's saying, they have a natural herding instinct, and they form a natural society. Cats by nature are solitary animals, like leopards and lions are the only social cats. Most cats, you wouldn't see them in families around, because they tend to like to be. Cats actually are very territorial. They don't like another cat. So coming back to animals, the way we keep them today as Muslim, I ask you this because I tell you, my first Hajj. Let me just go on a quick sidebar here. My first Hajj was 1990, and frankly, I was shocked. Wallahi, I was shocked.
See the way that
yes,
I know.
You had this guy mechanistically, and there was almost a mountain of carcasses. I'm telling you, as a Muslim, what I saw offended me. Maybe I'm a Western snowflake, but what I saw, and I'm gonna, for the record, tell you who I am. I am the son of a halal butcher. I have been slaughtering animals my life from the age of 9 till the age of 19 till I was doing A-levels. I was doing since primary school. So I know about blood, and I was slaughtering, and yet my first Hajj, I was 29, 19. I was appalled at what I saw in there in slaughter.
The way the animals were
Yes,
slaughtered.
mountain of carcasses of goats, and this man he kneeled on it like this, on the side of it, knelt on that part of the body, and he just cutting. I'm sure he is saying Bismillah. I didn't hear, but I'm sure. But the fact is, what I saw there with this accumulation of carcasses, just one, and it's pushed to the side. Another, and it goes to till it becomes a mound of carcasses. How would you
Will this thing could happen in anywhere in the world?
But the holiest place.
1 second, no, 1 second. And I'll tell you why. What is the reason? It hasn't got nothing to do whether it's in a holy land or any. It's all to do with those uncivilized people, because civilization means how to raise up somebody to understand life in a better ways. Like, for instance, somebody's grown up in a jungle, or even in the middle of village in Africa. Even if he's a Muslim, I'm not gonna compare him to someone who's even not Muslim, who's been raised up in London. The way they speak, the way they treat others, the way. Don't get me wrong, but it's still there's something called civilization. Even the scholars had said this, So this comes to people who've been raised up in a certain way that they don't distinguish between even like tree and animal, for instance. The way they are even from childhood. And sometimes you will find the children, like even for instance, for our countries, during the time of the sacrifice, after the celebration, we find sometimes the younger children, they get used to the animal, like they keep it, like the sheep for a month or 2 months or 3 months, and then you see the younger boy will hold it and say, don't slaughter, and he start to cry, But then, I myself personally, I slaughtered animal once in my life, and it was in 1980 in America, and I lived there for a couple of years, and I had a brother who goes and slaughter animals in a halal way. Then he sells the sheep, and he said to me, Abdul, come with me. So I went there, and then I said, come on, try it. And that's the only time, although it's our ways of life to do it, but personally myself, I cannot see a blood. My nature, like, I don't get involved in wars, and it's some people would love to suck blood, others they can't even see it.
The people who work in slaughterhouses, they're from the most marginalised communities, and also it's not well paid. There's lots of people who are alcoholic, lots of people who have drug issues, who carry out slaughterhouse activities. I don't think there's anyone in their right mind who would want to do a job of killing an innocent creature all day long.
But you know, when you think, for instance, like those who commit a crime, if you ask any person who like commits a crime against a human, like killing a human being, like walking the street and rape and kill, you would ask them this question: the first time when you had raped someone or killed someone, how did you feel? Then after that, it will become normal. For instance, when people are sent to war, for instance, in Afghanistan, the Americans, they teach them how you become like, they control their minds and they become murderers. And after that, maybe one day after, when he kills like 100 person, he might something with rings in his head and wakes him up and become a better person, or he might even commit suicide after feeling the guilt, which is, I've seen it myself, They cannot bear that dreams at night all the time, and then something would happen to their life.
It's like Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I endorse. As I was explaining to you before, I started slaughtering, first starting with chickens at the age of 9. This was our family business. And the first chicken I held to slaughter, my father said, this is what we do for a living. We feed people for a living. All right. Yeah. The first chicken made a sound, and wallahi, I thought I could hear the chicken saying, help.
Yeah.
I thought I actually heard the chicken saying, help. Like you said, it took a lot of courage and guts and water for a 9-year-old. But after I slaughtered the first 10 or so, like you say, it became routine. And I didn't feel much. My feelings were inured to slaughtering animals.
I give you example, for instance, as a Muslim myself, okay? I eat meat. And I'm not gonna say something inside me telling me not to eat meat, but I feel sometimes, but because it's the reason why I eat meat, it's one reason, that because I believe in Islam, and the Quran said that Allah had made this for you to be subservient, allowed to eat it. And who had said it?
Who's the mechanized conditions?
But who said that? The creation of animals. He said he made everything subservient to you, including animals being made subservient to you. So obviously, if the commands comes from above, that we should do something, but in the same time there is rules, a lot of rules. For instance, there's certain animals you're not gonna eat, you're not allowed to eat. Certain animals you only use them to ride, and others you shouldn't just. And in any ways, it's been created for certain things, and it has to be whatever they've been created for a certain purpose and a certain ways that you could enjoy them.
But for example, in this country, we produce more animals than any other country in Europe. So we've got something
because
like
we eat a lot of meat for the Muslims.
No, we export a lot of it. It's a big money-making industry.
Yes.
So we've got 30 million sheep. We've got 130 million chickens. We've got lots of pigs, lots of cows. But we only provide 60% of what we need to eat. Because creating animal protein is extremely inefficient. So you need 16 kilograms of plant protein to make just 1 kilogram of meat protein. So it's highly inefficient. Like I do the slaughterhouse in Sussex, and we go and stand outside to bear witness to the animals, and I speak to the farmers, and they say we can't grow food here. We can't grow food. But what they mean is they can't get their ploughs on the field. So they say that of 60% of Britain's farmland. But just down the road at a National Trust property, on the same hilly terrain that's clay, that they can't get their tractors on with the ploughs, they're growing 6.6 tons of fruit and vegetables on about 1.5 acres. Now the same farmers are getting maybe 300 or 400 kilos of meat on land that they say you can't grow vegetables on. But you can grow vegetables on, they're just doing it in a different system. They're not using the plough, and the method that they're using is saying that the plough is and always was destructive to the soil, because it's cutting it up, it destroys the structure, it destroys the fungal layer. The worms are acting very efficiently to aerate the soil. When the nutrients are dropped on the earth, the worms drag that down and bring it in and the fungal layer underneath helps bring minerals to feed the plants, and that's how the permaculture works. But the ploughing, you plough it up, and then you need to add nutrients to it, and you need to bring in herbicides, and you need to bring in pesticides. But with the no-dig method, you don't need any of that.
You know, one thing that I think personally that we should understand in this life and be aware of it and find the exact measure for it. God Almighty, He said that when He created it, He said, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ He put the scale and the balance. So basically, as a human being, we should know what is the balance is. The balance in life is in every single thing in life, how we balance it. Like, not something goes above the others. Like for instance, as I said, you know, how to use the lands, where people should live. Always should be a balance. You know, we cannot just destroy a forest and cut all the trees, and then we have no more trees, and we use it for instance, any other things. So there is a balance in everything, and we have, a human being, have to work out what that balance is.
Well, we know.
For instance, like for instance, we cannot grow more vegetables more than what the people need, for instance, or because we can use it for whatever. So there is a balance. Not so basically, balance means against the greed.
Yeah.
Greed of people. When somebody is greedy, then they make anything. They will destruction. And God Almighty said, "Don't destroy the earth."
Yeah.
You know, He said, "Corruption has appeared on the land and on the sea." He said, God Almighty, on the land and in the sea, basically everywhere, because of what man had his hand has earned, had caused it. So basically, if you look everything, like I remember once I went to the hospital and I had a problem in my chest, and the doctor said, she was talking about mad cow disease, and I said, "You mean main mad cow disease?" Main mad. She said, "What?" I said, "That's a nice thing to say." I said, "Main mad." I said, "Cows, they don't become mad, but you know, when you feed them the wrong thing, you know." So
my dissertation in 1993 was on soybean production in the Amazon basin, and 95% of the soybean was being exported for animal fodder in the West, and all the social consequences of that were people displaced from those areas, the environmental destruction of the Amazon, but the people then living in shanty towns, the children then on the streets sniffing glue, the fact that in those shanty towns the men have to travel long distances to get work, and all the violence of the police against people on squatting on the periphery of cities and the landowners. So all that comes into the value and the balance around people consuming the meat, which is largely comes from monoculture in third world countries, and the subsidies also that are paid to the farmers.
I'll give you an example. For instance, now when people consume, even as individuals, we always advise what to eat and how much portion that we should eat from each protein, isn't it? Like too much meat, too much. So there is a balance, and there's alternative things that we could use instead of red meat, white meat, fish, all these things. So we should keep the balance, to keep ourselves safe as individual, as a human being, and also the same way we have to look at our planet, how to keep it, And if you look at, as you said, destruction, when something happens in this world, like in this country, for instance, we are all responsible for anything could happen in any part of the world. But sometimes we cannot see that what we could do wrong here could lead to somebody suffers in the end of the other part of the world. You see, we live in one world that we have all to join together. We have to work all together and find the best way how to keep this planet safe for all of us, for everything else, And
do you think as Muslims we are making a determined enough effort, especially regarding the little things like the consumption of meat, which is of dubious provenance? Do you think, we come from a lot of pastoral society. Many people are Somali, they come from nomadic society, they're used to a lot of meat. Many are Arabs, they come from pastoral society, they're used to a lot of meat. So they will come here and eat a lot of meat still. However, the meat they're eating here is not reared, is in the same healthy conditions as back in their countries. So what, according to what the vegan brothers say, what can we do as Muslims?
I think, I'll give you an example. For instance, when we look at religion, religion is not something like what we people think, doing your prayer, or there are 5 pillars of, for instance, Islam. You pay charity, which is a major. Obviously, that's that those pillars, which is 5 pillars, which is holding Islam, but it's not Islam itself. But look, for instance, paying a charity, which is keeps everybody safe, those who are not working, and the rich has to pay a portion of their money to the poor. All this to bring solidarity in the society. But at the same time, there is other rules for each person as an individual. For instance, fasting, there are a lot of quotation from the tradition of our prophets. For instance, like, when you eat, you shouldn't fill your stomach. You should have one portion for the air, one portion for the water. And also there's one quotation that says, that the stomach is the place where all the diseases, like whatever you eat, that what causes. There are so many things, and God Almighty said, when you eat, do not, overspend, money, not overspend, not to do things the wrong, not to waste. And God Almighty says those who are the wasters, like they use things and the truth, are the brothers of the devils, ikhwan al-shayateen. So there is a lot of things to do with the health, a lot of things to do with the way our life lives, a lot of things to do with how we live with others. Also in terms of creatures in this planet, as I say, and myself, I personally believe that we are part of this creation. And we should share this earth with all other creations. Like there is link between a human and animals, link between animals and trees. So in terms of even the way that everything glorifies God, because if we believe that God created us, obviously also we believe that God created the trees and the animals and every production in this planet. God made it to be exist. So we are not the only one, but we are the carer, we are the takers in this planet. We are the responsibles for every destruction happens in this planet.
I know when you used to give the khutbah in Masjid Noor, I knew you talked about things like this. So I know your position on this, but now we're speaking to a wider audience. Do you believe we have enough imams who discuss this subject?
As I said, it comes always, a religion encourages people to understand life and seek knowledge. And when we say, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say the Quran itself, the Quran called ayat. The word ayat, not it's a wrong translation, we say verses. Like the Bible, ayat means signs. And the Quran, among these ayat, there are many ayat, many signs in the Quran. It's related to the earth and heaven. It says among the signs of God, your creation. Among the signs of God, the difference in your speeches. Among the signs of God, the difference in your colors. Among the signs of God, behold, in the creation of earth and heaven and the alternation of days and night are signs for people of understanding. So basically, everything is a sign. The creation of animals, the creation of moon, movement. So every single thing is a sign of God. So basically, what does it mean, sign? It means an indication that God is beyond this thing, and also God Almighty in control of these things, and God Almighty is the one who set the rules how those things could work, could move, could be used, whatever. So we sometimes, the problem that us with the human being, like for instance, let's say, generally speaking with a human being, sometimes we think we are above other creation. Then amongst the human being themselves, one race believes that above the other race, one country believes the other. So this is the problem. So even among us as a human being, among ourselves, from one village to another, from one race to another, from one country to another. And we always, like for instance, let's say for instance, once I was talking here, just over here, and I was talking about racism, and it was a policewoman with a policeman. She was a dark lady. You know what she said? She said, I don't care as long as my colleague, the policeman, he would not make a racist comment. I don't care if he's racist. You know what I said? I said, that's not racism. Do you know why? Because maybe your tongue could split, you make a comment, a racist comment, because you don't mean it. But split because in society, like the F word, people use it. But the true racism, when somebody feels inside, when you walk in the street and say, no, I'm different than that person, he's white and he's black. That is the true meaning of racism. It's not just comment. In some societies, people try to make racist comment. But as I said, you are wrong. A policewoman, she said, I don't care. I said, no, you should care. And not you care, but the other person who feels inside that his blood dearer than other person's blood or his color, then he is racist. Then he is discriminating others. Then he believes that he's above others. Like for one nation has in this world that they have to gain power, on the expense that other nation should lose power. One nation becomes strong, other nation becomes weak. Why? Just like I'm not going to talk about, for instance, one of particular religion where they consider themselves to be the master of the world. I mean, I don't want to say Judaism, for instance, but still the chosen people, they consider themselves Sha'bullah al-Mukhtar. But in the same time, when a rabbi was asked why can't everybody becomes a Jew, he said if everyone becomes a Jew, then we don't have slaves. We can't be all masters. You see my point here? I mean, just like some people, they wanted to be like other people. For instance, they have to have a specific way of life. The master and the servant, the certain clothes you are not allowed to wear, but only the slaves or the servant or the housemate, or So there is a lot of things comes inside a human being.
That brings me. I just want to take him up on the subject of slavery here, because he's Razak is from Libya, and this I don't know, when was the last time you were in Libya?
2 months ago.
You just came back. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah ala salama. بينك وبيني يا أخي, what did you see in terms of what I am seeing on the news about black people being enslaved and sold and whipped and maltreated?
This is not true. This is a big lie. I'll tell you
All
something
of it's untrue?
personally. I'll tell you personally. As a Libyan,
Yeah.
I always say something. I say I could have a trouble with a Libyan as a Libyan, and I'm from the capital. I could end up in a trouble, but I will never end up in a trouble with a black guy from Africa, because I'll tell you why. Because he's a guest, he's a stranger, and I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say something. It might sound. Once I was driving my car, traffic lights here in the road. So there are a few guys who clean the windows. Years back, you see guys on the traffic light, and there are a few white guys and one black gentleman. And when he came, he cleaned the car. He's the only one that gave him money. Otherwise, I didn't. If he was the white one, I wouldn't give him the money. I gave to the black one. Why? Because I didn't want him to feel I didn't give him money because of his color. I'm sorry, but this is me personally. Okay, I've just something else.
Did you travel around Libya? How long did you spend in Libya?
Sorry?
How long in your last trip here? How long did you spend?
It's a few months. I'm aware of
You
Libya very
moved
well.
around the country.
Listen, I'll tell you something.
But I really need to know about this.
Most of the African in Libya,
Yeah.
Libya is open to the African. They come and work, no problem. Because of the lack of security now, sometimes, like any place in the world, there are some gangs could stop a black boy when he come back from work, because he knows he gets paid, for instance, and they take his money, like the drug dealers, those who are on drugs. This one thing. Other thing, a lot of them, they work there, and they will have a chance to cross the Mediterranean to Europe.
A lot of refugees.
Yeah, and they have to pay money.
Eritreans. I saw it on Channel 4.
I had one with us, working with us, Mahmoud. Believe me, the only thing I will let him do, we have a big place, big farm. I only allow him to clean the car because I don't want to clean it outside, so I can give him £10. But I swear by God, I shouldn't swear. If he wants to bring me a chair, I said, no, I'm not gonna. Why you want to bring me a chair? I can't bring a chair, I'm not disabled. Or you want, okay? This is me, okay? Now he is in Italy. You know, he sends me photos on, with the nice jewelries and things. He crossed he got some money. Maybe he paid $2,000. And now he's working. Now he went to Malta. I'm still in contact with him. And I said, anyway, I mean, it's a disease inside the heart. Okay?
Just on ecology.
I was really hoping to ask a few more questions.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't know you just came back from Libya.
No,
I haven't seen you
I'm-
around, but I know you don't come here anymore, so I wouldn't expect to see you here. But I am really concerned because Channel 4 ran a series of documentaries. You know, Jon Snow and those, Channel 4. And I have a lot of respect for Channel 4. Because they came and interviewed at our mosque, and I found their interview in Masjid Noor was very balanced. So I have a lot of respect for Channel 4 News. And what I've seen on the news is that when the Italians tell the Libyan Coast Guard, take care of the problem, Italy is full, they are taking them back to Libya and enslaving them and selling them and brutalizing them. They showed camps. You've never heard any of this, never saw any of this?
There are groups of people in Libya.
Mostly Eritreans in the last
yeah.
documentaries.
There are one or couple of guys who are malicious, you know, they have weapons and things.
Yeah.
So what they did, they start to do this trade, not the slavery trade, how to put people in boats and send them to Italy. And maybe that boat is not secure, like for 20 people, they put 100 person and people died. That's the only thing happened. But the rest is all rubbish and lies.
No,
And
they
I
should
will say-
beat- they should
I'm
beat
gonna
him.
say as a Libyan, I'm not gonna say I will even stand as a candidate for a mayor of Tripoli. I'm telling you this. So I'm aware of this. So I hate lies. Even when the uprising started, Obama was talking about place Fashlum. I'm the son of Fashlum. I was standing there. A lot of lies with Al Jazeera and there are so much lies you could hear unless if you are in that place and in that position. And with me, I would talk even against myself, against my children if they do something wrong. So there's nothing to hide. I have nothing would stop me. This is me personally. So I
What's
don't
the
like
story
this.
about the town of Tawarga about 5 years ago? Gaddafi was overthrown in 2011. About 2012, 2013. They said that there's a town of people which was almost maybe 80-90% black people called Tawarga. I don't know if they were Tawareg or what kind
Yeah,
of
I
people
know
living
Tawareg,
there. Yeah, and they said that that town was obliterated after the fall of Gaddafi because they were supporters of Gaddafi, but there was a racist element to it. Can't be on sorry in it.
No,
What
no.
do you think about that?
I work with Tawarga, I personally, okay? And I
You know
help
the place?
them. I know I know the community, and I help the community, and I made a lot of even articles about the way they should go back to their place. What happened with Tawarga and Musrata? Tawarga, there are some of their children. They work with Gaddafi. When the uprising started, some of them had, because there are a lot of Tawargas, black brothers and sisters, they live in Musrata. They didn't get involved against Musrata. What happened? Some of these guys start to rape women. So sometimes
Some of the people of Tawarga were raping women.
yeah, they did some, yeah.
Okay.
But there are, as I said, so sometimes when somebody does something like that, then you could blame the whole, which is not right.
Collective
I'm against-
punishment.
Yeah, I'm not against. I tell you something, okay? I know even some of the people in Musrata killed some tower. Even one guy I interviewed here in Edgeworth Road. I'm not gonna raise these issues because of, you know, we try to solve. But as I said, this happens. And now they wanted to go back, and they went back to their city. And we always wanted nothing would happen, you know,
Yes.
because you know when Arabs and
You know, as Muslim to Muslim, you are African, I'm African. I am seeing this as a problem when I speak to my non-Muslim, thank you, brother. When I speak to our non-Muslim people. The people we did da'wah, your brother Khaja, we come here, we do da'wah.
Yeah, how's Khaja?
We try to bring, alhamdulillah, his health is getting better.
still at
Inshallah
home?
khair. Yeah, the legs. You know the problem with the legs. We try to give da'wah to our people, to bring them to Islam. But then they look on the television and they see documentaries with Arabs being racist to black people. Now, we need to say that Islam is being brought into disrepute by behavior like this. If you start calling people Abd and, you know, kicking them, they showed cages, places where they were being confined and beaten. I saw this documentary, Channel 4 News, more than one. Last few were about Eritreans. But prior to that, they were just all Africans. And they're saying that there's a very strong anti-black racism in Libya. What do you say to that?
you know,
Because it makes it hard for us to do
you know,
that.
I think Libyan in general are very conservative and soft people, and they treat everybody the best place you could. One of the best places. If you tell me Saudi, I'll tell you there are racists. In the Gulf, there are more racism in Gulf than in North Africa. No, Africans are in Morocco, Africans are in Tunisia, Africans are in Libya, and nobody will stop them. And some of them, they even like they deal with the drugs and things, you know. And you don't just catch a picture of somebody somewhere in a cage and we don't even, government doesn't even know where, or you know, you don't. I mean, I could have a photos here and I said, I put a black boy here and then said this is in Libya.
But since, would you call Libya a failed state at the moment? A failed state?
A failed state, but still, if England is a failed state, or for America, I will see much more crimes in it. No,
Because it is a worry in that
How about how many black Libyans who you find them in every single mosque and every... So if people would treat the black Africans, what about the black Libyans? How would we consider that? Because it's in the end of the day what brings them together is the color, isn't it? So they will defend them. So we don't have these problems, they're nonsense. But as I said, there are people there are a lot of African in Libya now. They take them and sometimes they send them back, okay? And they keep them. But what happens? Who does all these problems? I would say to you, you know, the European used to bring the black people as a slaves and the American. And now they don't want them to come back. And what else they do? They let them die in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the Mediterranean. Believe me, they don't even help them.
Yeah,
they send them back.
I'd say that
and there are some, I'm not going to say, there are a human being with it, like organization, they try to save them, but the government themselves, God knows what they do.
I'd say that the cause is monoculture. That's what I'd say, like the same system of the soybean production in the Amazon basin, displacing people in Brazil. The same is happening in countries in Africa. Monoculture. In America, animal agriculture uses 51% of America's fresh water. The same in all monoculture systems. They're extremely water hungry and they're extremely nutrient hungry. So it's all this monoculture that's largely to feed animals in Western countries that is the main cause of displacement of people. So I'd say that's the root cause. It's a bit like I talk to people about the Victorian toilet. So the Victorian toilet was only invented 150 years ago. In that short time, the practice of shitting into water has been transported all around the world and also into the animal agriculture business. So we've got 70 billion domestic animals. In America, the animals produce 130 times more shit than what the people do. And if you were to step back from the planet in that short period of time, 150 years since Albert invented the Victorian toilet here to stop the big stench, that process, the fertility of the world is going into the oceans because most factory farms are sited by rivers. So talking about causes of displacement of people, talking about causes of pollution, animal agriculture is the biggest business in the world and is causing the devastation of ecosystems, the desertification all around the world and the displacement of people. And that's the main reality, regardless of any histories that we might put a place on it.
Forgive me, I have to go, okay? I'm sorry, okay?
Shaykhana, welcome back. It's good to see you in Speaker's Corner again.
Okay, nice to see you again.
Inshallah, you're coming next week, yeah, Abdul Razak. You're back next week? Inshallah, I'll see you. Right, salam. I'm going to wrap this up because I'm getting very cold. Thanks for you, but you gave me some very interesting insights. One question I'd like to ask you before you go. Tell me more about monoculture in sub-Saharan Africa that's impacting on the people, causing them to go northward towards countries like Libya, trying to cross the Mediterranean. Do you know much about the monoculture there in sub-Saharan Africa?
So any monoculture that requires water systems.
Peanuts? Groundnuts?
Well, it depends. Like there's different, like for example here in Europe, you have olives, almonds, and walnuts, for example, and some of them don't require any irrigation and some do. And it's dependent on what they received when they were young trees. So a young tree that's used to having plentiful supplies of water will then want water all through its life.
Right.
And if it's not given it, they will die.
Okay.
But then you have what are called secanos, for example, in Spain, olives which have never been irrigated, almonds that have never been irrigated.
But olives tend to be drought resistant.
Yeah, well, it depends.
If you speak, because we were discussing Libya just now, and you brought this up in relation to Libya, which puts me in mind of sub-Saharan Africa, whence most of these people are emigrating from. They're trying to get out of the desertification. But like you, if you mentioned monoculture, I was intrigued to know from you which monocultures in sub-Saharan Africa are causing the most aridity, are causing the most desertification. Do you know of them? Any?
Well, it's where you have large field systems, I would say. If you can check out Greening the Deserts by someone called Jeffrey Lawton, who's been working in the Middle East. And in order to create a system that doesn't require external irrigation, there's two things that are always present in the air. You've got fungal spores and you have water. So if you can create an environment where the fungal spores can settle, which is basically creating mulch on the surface, so a cool area that is not going to be subject to the sun's rays, the fungal spores can lodge there, and then they can reconnect with the salt deposits in arid lands. So in some systems they try and wash out salt deposits because they will burn plants. But actually if you put the mulch down, the fungal spores can connect with those salt deposits that have nutrients, and then you can plant trees. And then once the trees get to a certain height, the other thing that you have in the air other than fungal spores is water.
Yeah.
So in the night time the water goes down and you forms the dew.
Yeah.
And then in the daytime it will rise up. And as soon as you've got the first trees, they will hit the leaves and then start to go back down again.
Right.
So then you can start to develop a contained system of what you call agroforestry, where you have the crops underneath a series of trees. So you don't have like your field system is more resembling nature. So the same like this project down the road at National Trust property where they do no dig. You remember last year the sunny conditions, hot conditions last year?
Yeah.
They didn't water once, not once, and their sweet corn was this high, their pumpkins were huge, because what they're doing is protecting the soil from being dried out by the sun, and they're protecting the soil structure. So the earthworms are doing their job. The fungal layer underneath can start to develop.
But if we're talking about areas on the Sahel, which is the part of Africa where the desert is beginning to impinge.
Yeah.
Now, when you take areas like that, in historical times, they used to grow crops like sorghum, millet, which are naturally drought-resistant crops, moringa, things like that. And then the colonizers imported cash crops, monoculture. One of them is peanuts, groundnuts, and things like that. And so the question I'm asking you is, do you not suppose that crops like groundnuts and cotton take a lot of water and they are depleting the water table, whereas if we would do better, is my suggestion, if we reintroduced sorghum, millet, which the people actually eat as a mainstay, but they grow it as a food crop on the side, incidental to the main cash crop. Things like groundnuts, using up a lot of water. Now, rice, they grow in the Gambia and Senegal, but they historically had their own form of dry rice. There was a kind of rice that used less water, which was supplanted by the rice that they imported from the Far East, which is more commercially viable, which is a rice that consumes a lot of water. What would you say in reply to what I've just said here?
I think mixed permaculture is the best, where you have a variety of different crops, because then, you know, in whatever conditions that you might have in a certain year, certain crops will do well and certain won't. And also you can have companion planting. So
better for the ecology, the animal, the birds that live in the trees, feed on the fruit, different fruit.
Yeah, so that you have, for example, in this country, in organic systems of apple growing, you would grow tansy, which acts as an insect repellent. And so you can create these, like the nettle is known as a doctor plant, you know, because it will keep certain diseases off. So it's good to have nettles around.
Would that not mean that we would have less production, or we'd have to just eat less as human beings? No. We have to pay more and eat less.
It's like
the meat discussion we were having. It seems to me as Muslims, we like to take our discussion from an Islamic standpoint. As Muslims, as Sheikh Abdul Razak was saying, Rabbil Alameen, God is the sustainer of the universe, and we're supposed to be basically caretakers of the planet, which we do not do. We import masses of meat from New Zealand, not caring very much how it's reared as long as it's cheap. So I'm saying, the bottom line seems to me, we'd have to eat less of everything and pay more for it if we want to raise or rear it whether it be crop arable farming or animal husbandry. If we're going to do it sustainably and humanely, we'll have to pay more and eat less. What do you think?
Well, as a vegan, I think that it's not necessary. I've been 20 years not eating animal products, except the odd bit of roadkill and also food from bins. But that's not causing harm to those animals as such. So I don't think it's necessary as human beings to consume meat or dairy. I think we can be extremely healthy. So, for example, I take hemp seeds and I soak those overnight and I blend them up in the morning and put it through a muslin bag. And then I blend that with nettles and cleavers now that they're coming up in the springtime. And I soak dates, so I put some dates in to sweeten it. I wouldn't have to, but it's I like that. But I think, the oils within the hemp seeds provide the omega-3s and the omega-6s, the essential oils that we might otherwise get from animal fats. But we can get it from plant products as long as we know.
I think people like you are pioneers. I don't think in any time soon, Muslims in particular, like I said, coming from largely pastoral societies, are going to become vegan anytime soon.
But the rabbis, there was a group of 150 rabbis signed a document urging the Jewish peoples to go towards a plant-based diet.
Israeli rabbis or Brooklyn rabbis? Where are they from?
I'm not sure actually, but I think from around the world.
Right.
I think.
Uh-huh.
But I would like. In this country, the vegans went from 150,000, according to a census in 2006, to a Maury poll in 2016, which went to 550,000.
No doubt, it's increasing.
And now people
It
think
clearly
it's
is.
up to 3 million, which is 5%
yeah.
of the population. If it goes the same for another couple of years, we might reach that 10%, which people say is a tipping point. So, for example, this Christmas, a third of all caterers around the domestic table were catering for a vegan. So that meant there was a lot of social pressure around the subject, the subject's coming up.
I know,
And with regard to men, because women have traditionally led the way within the vegan movement, probably because of the empathic, compassionate response to the plight of animals. Men, in general, seem to be more convinced by the environmental argument, because it's about rationality, it's about statistics.
Historically,
it's about science.
in hunter-gatherer societies, I'm sure you know, whilst vegetable gathering, foraging for crops, nuts, berries, seeds, roots was a woman's occupation, the more precarious act of cornering an elephant or a rhinoceros was man's work. So meat was always a prestige food. So men associate meat with manliness. So
there's a film coming out this year called Game Changers, which, do you know James Cameron, who produced the film Avatar?
Okay.
One of the biggest grossing films.
So
he's vegan and his partner's animal rights activist.
Right.
So he's produced this film called Game Changers, which is coming out this year, which is all about top sportsmen and women at the top of their pursuit. Be it in mixed martial arts or bodybuilding, Germany's strongest man, whatever area, to show that to be strong, to be endurance, to show endurance, you don't have to eat meat. And that actually, a plant-based diet can facilitate training because it takes more time to digest the meat, and you can train more on a plant-based diet.
So how will we eventually get that message across to the people you mentioned earlier, the Eskimo or the Bedouin who lives in the deep desert where he can't grow crops, or the Eskimo who has to live on seal and walrus and narwhal?
The vegan definition is not causing any unnecessary harm. So
clubbing a whole heap of seals?
Eskimos have to do that to
clubbing
eat
seals
in their environment. Yeah, they have to do that. So they don't have a choice, do they? They've got no other food source. There's a different situation if those Eskimos have suddenly come into a city culture and they're living in centrally heated houses and they've got supermarkets, then they're living in a different situation then.
Interesting. Look, man, nice talking to you.
Yeah, pleasure.
What's your name?
Teo.
Teo.
Teo, yeah.
Yoruba name? Teo. It means
Yeah,
full of,
that's what I'm known as.
It's a Yoruba name.
It's a nickname.
Teo, it means full of joy in Yoruba.
Okay. And your name is?
Juma.
Juma.
Dan Juma. Friday.
Danjuma.
Yeah, we are north of the Yoruba, we are Hausas.
Okay, nice.
Where the desert is encroaching and where I believe people ought to be encouraged to start back growing sorghum, millet, drought-resistant crops which have historically always been part of their diet. It has to be made sexy, it has to be made fashionable, it has to be made so that young people can be encouraged to plant food, resist the encroachment of the desert, and bloody stay home instead of going to Libya.
Greening the desert.
Definitely.
Greening the desert.
We're on the same page.
Look it up on YouTube. You can see on greening the desert.
I will do. Nice talking to you.
Right,
Yeah, I think I'm out. I'm going to go. It's getting too cold. Gentlemen, thank you all for your kind attention. See you all. I'm out.
Okay, that was short.
Content over everything from your Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Brilliant.
Listen.
So this is Steve, the latest roving reporter for COE.
Man, don't listen to ITV. I don't even listen to ITV. I just listen to COE. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
So yeah, no, I didn't say where we are. So we're in East London and we're at talking Turning Point, get it right? Turning Point UK's inaugural meeting today. So we had a lot of young people, a lot of people from London colleges. I think they're on to Nottingham later in the week and then